I'm too nostalgic, I'll admit it.
We graduated 4 months ago. What can you possibly be nostalgic for?
I'm nostalgic for conversations I had yesterday. I've begun reminiscing events before they even occur. I'm reminiscing this right now. I can't go to the bar because I've already looked back in it in my memory, and I didn't have a good time.
Welcome back to Thinking Critical. This is Wes. It's time for another comic book retrospective. We're going to DC Comics and a first appearance of Black Lightning number 1 through 8, really the first story arc from Tony Isabella and a very young Trevor Von Eeden, who I believe was 17 years old when he illustrated this comic book or began illustrating it. It should be a lot of fun. Obviously, I have the regular crew here with me today. We've got award-winning comic book editor, writer, Joe Corallo. How you doing, Joe?
I'm all right, Wes. How are you?
I'm doing great. Glad to have you back. Also, we've got the voice of the voiceless, the man so cool they call him the Breen. Eric Breen, how you doing?
Doing well.
So, Eric, you were the one that said you wanted to tackle Black Lightning 1 through 8. What is it about this that you needed to get on the channel? Because it was a lot of fun.
This came out about a year or so after I started in the hobby, and there'd been a couple of other titles that had started around the same time. There was Nova, Ms. Marvel, Black Lightning, and this one, just as good as those other two were, this first story arc blew those away. As far as like an introduction to a character and a first story arc, yeah, a lot of times people seem to write for it's almost like they say like they're writing Netflix pitches now. This would have been an incredible movie, and that was not the thought process. This was done to make a great comic book, and it succeeded.
Absolutely. It's a wonderful introduction to the character. He's also working in Metropolis, Joe, so he's a neighbor to Superman. Why was it necessary to have a Black Lightning show up in Metropolis at this time?
Well, I think if you're going to introduce a new character, and you see this happen all the time, you want to make those sales, and Superman this was still a time where Superman was arguably selling higher than the Bat books. Like, Superman was still, you had a lot of Superman titles, and if you wanted to set someone up for success, you get that Superman seal of approval. So that kind of stuff can help with the sales and help people to come in and be like, okay, this is a cool character. Superman likes him. He's okay in my book. Absolutely.
It's certainly, we do get to see Superman. We see Clark Kent. We see Jimmy Olsen and some of the characters from there. We also see the 100, who I believe were they in Supergirl before this?
The 100 was a backup feature in Lois Lane. The Thorn was the character that battled them. And I think this was kind of like an extension of that, because for whatever reason they weren't using the Thorn character. This was a good way to bring back the 100 and give them an antagonist in Black Lightning. And since they had set up their operation in Metropolis, it just kind of all the pieces kind of fell into place.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's a new street level hero for DC Comics. And, this is a different time, Joe Corallo. Things are changing in the comic book industry. We've already got Luke Cage Power Man as the first kind of leading black superhero character. And I believe, Black Lightning is the first leading black superhero character at DC Comics.
Yeah, who had his own book. Like, obviously John Stewart and some other characters existed before this, but didn't have their own, like, brand new number 1 book where they were the star. But this is also an interesting time, because this was comics were only 17 pages at this time. We're right before, within a year of the implosion about for DC. We're still quite a bit away from,
if
Frank
people don't know
Miller's
the implosion at DC, that's when they had all these new titles scheduled to go out. They had this new initiative, and then there was a big winter storm that just ruined everything, correct?
That was part of it. Yeah. It all they ended up having to cut a lot of titles. They famously almost had to cut Detective Comics, and it was saved beforehand. But speaking of the Detective Comics by Steve Englehart and Marshall Rogers that we went over, happens corresponding with this. It's like a few issues, I think, into Black Lightning that starts in Detective. But this does start with what was it? Detective Comics 468 comes out this same month, and that's the first Marshall Rogers on a Detective Comics issue. But this was, I think it was Bob Haney, and this was he was fighting the Calculator. So it's before all that stuff happens with Steve Englehart. There's interesting stuff going on with the Legion at this point. This is during Paul Levitt's first crack at the book. This is Jim Sherman is the artist on the book at this point. Mike Grell had just left, but this is the first appearance of Dawnstar. Comes out this month. That was technically though created by Paul Levitz and Mike Grell, because they created it together first before Mike Grell left the book, but didn't get to start it until Jim Sherman was the artist on it. And if you go over to Marvel, The Avengers is currently being written by Jim Shooter. This is just a little before the Korvac saga, which both of you had gone over separately before we started doing these kind of retrospectives.
Absolutely. So it's an exciting time of comics. DC hasn't quite grown up. We haven't got to the Crisis. We haven't got, The Dark Knight Returns. We haven't got Watchmen yet. So DC's just about to get a shakeup, and Black Lightning is certainly a welcome addition to the roster. Let's get into it, because we got 8 issues to get through, and it's going to take a bit. There's a lot of stuff happening, as you can imagine. Black Lightning #1 is aptly titled Black Lightning. Writer Tony Isabella, penciler Trevor and Eeden, as I mentioned earlier, at the tender age of 17. Inks by Frank Springer, and we have a new hero in Suicide Slum, which is part of Metropolis. Jefferson Pierce, school teacher and former Olympic athlete, is returned, and he learns that his neighborhood is ran by a criminal organization called the 100. And Black Lightning confronts Joey Toledo, who's one of the 100's most notorious drug pushers. He runs through Toledo's men, grabs his collar, and tells him to meet him at Garfield High Gymnasium at midnight. And later we see Black Lightning is consults with his friend Peter Gambi, and he says, I need to clean up the streets, but he kind of starts regretting using the school as a battlefield, Breed.
Yeah, we find out as the story progresses that something has taken place in between. This is basically a flashback first issue of why he needed to go from being Jefferson Pierce to somebody else, because his actions inadvertently cost the life of one of his students, and he realizes that he can't be Jefferson Pierce and fight them, because that could the 2 innocent people could be hurt. So that compels him to come up with a different identity that he can take them on as, and that's why he Gambi creates the 2 of them create the Black Lightning identity for him.
Yep. So speaking of that, we do get the flashback to 2 weeks earlier. Pierce has recently arrived back at Garfield High, where he was a star athlete. The principal, Chapin, I believe his name is, they're reminiscing about the old days. Jefferson does see a drug pusher in the school. He just knocks him right out on the spot. And so later, Toledo, who's with the 100, and a group of thugs storm the gymnasium. They got guns. They attack Jefferson. And that's when we have a good Samaritan, Earl Clifford, who idolizes Jefferson. He's a star basketball player, jumps in, and they kind of handle the 100. And that's we're starting to see the reasons that Black Lightning is necessary, Joe.
Yeah, no, it's a great scene. He does that all in a pretty nice suit that doesn't really get too scuffed up, which is pretty impressive. But
he does do it in style.
Yes, it's really good. That whole bit in the gymnasium when they come in and all that, and then immediately after that, we get introduced to Tobias Whale, who's really not thrilled with this turn of events. And the interesting thing about Tobias Whale is he feels very Kingpin.
Mm-hmm.
But this is also before Frank Miller reimagining Kingpin. And he feels like he's almost like a midway point to getting to Frank Miller's Kingpin, because he's still, like, Tobias Whale's design still kind of feels like a like a big jolly John Romita Sr. kind of design, but he's a lot more intimidating, and it feels like he's more for an older audience than Kingpin back in those John Romita Sr. issues. So it does make me wonder if Frank Miller maybe pulled some influence from Black Lightning when he was coming up with the reimagining of Kingpin for his Daredevil run.
I would be surprised if he didn't, because it feels like a Kingpin for DC Comics, almost like Blockbuster right now.
Yeah.
And you mentioned we do get the Whale. He's the leader of the 100, and he does not want to mess with Jefferson. He doesn't want to make him like a martyr, so he orders his men to make an example of Earl Clifford, the basketball player. They go to jump him on the street. He runs away, and he ends up getting hit by a car. And this is crazy, Breen. I did not expect to see this. They string him up on the basketball hoop to set an example. It's a crazy illustration, and very well done by Trevor Von Eeden and Vince Colletta, the inker. It certainly leaves an impact with you, and it certainly impacts Jefferson. He's riddled with guilt. He goes to Gambi's tailor shop, as you mentioned earlier, and he emerges as Black Lightning. As you mentioned, he learned the lessons that innocent people can get hurt.
Yeah, you noticed that they went out. They made a point to say we were only going to beat on him, but the old expression, never let a good crisis go to waste. They decided, okay, well, we can't, it's too late now. Let's go ahead and make an example and really send a message. And so, yeah, that was, I remember I said as a kid reading that, when it turned that page, it was like, whoa, you don't really see that in comics all the time. And a quick aside, when I read the opening scene with Earl and Jefferson, kind of reminded me of that Welcome Back Kotter episode where Freddie Boom Boom Washington starts to get too big for his britches, and Mr. Kotter challenges him to a one-on-one, basically as a battle of respect. I'm wondering if Tony Isabella didn't remember that episode when he wrote that, because at the end he's calling him Teach and this, and then at the end of that scene it's like Mr. Pierce. Yeah. So I said, so he wins his respect, and then and they get close immediately. Then this happens to him. So that was in one issue. They made you care about the Earl Clifford character, made you feel his death, and it made you realize that this is you want to see how Jefferson handles this. And I said it's just it's just a great introductory issue.
Absolutely, it does. Like I said, that Joe, that image, like it sticks with you. I'm 43 years old.
Yeah.
And it's still impactful.
Yeah, and not only is this one issue, it's a shorter than standard issue for people today. They did all that in 17 pages. That's a big feat, and you could read some comics coming out today. This would easily be 3 issues of material.
When they redid Spider-Man's origin story, which I believe is 9 pages in Amazing Fantasy, right? Mm-hmm. When they it's not Amazing Fantasy, but Spider-Man. When they did the original origin, 9 stories. When they retold the origin, it was three issues.
Yeah,
that's crazy. They do not understand how to use real estate today, like they did back in the day. That brings us into Black Lightning number 2. Merlin means murder. Once again, Tony Isabella, Trevor Von Eeden, Vince Colletta. Was not expecting this one either, Joe. We get Talia al Ghul visiting Gambi, and she already knows who Black Lightning is, and she's kind of inquiring about that. And she says there are 100 trained assassins that are coming for him tonight. If he's not prepared, he's going to die. And then she also says there's one in particular named Merlin, I believe the Archer. He's the biggest threat. He's a former member of the League of Assassins, and he's the deadliest killer in the entire 100. And he's definitely somebody to look out with, and we can see that Black Lightning is in peril as he's fighting in the gymnasium once again.
Yeah, and I'm sure there's wrestling terms for all of this that you know better than I was, but again, you want to sell this guy to the audience. So you're like, what are we going to do? Let's take a guy like Merlin, who's gone toe to toe with the Justice League before, and have him take him out to show people that this guy is the real deal. And let's have him deal with someone like Talia, who is another, deadly character from, God, she's only been around at this point for what, maybe 7 years.
Yeah.
So, characters like that. And yeah, you're really building up this guy. We're 2 issues in and he's already pretty well ingrained into the DC universe while also clearly doing his own thing. And, that takes a lot. That's a lot of skillful writing on Tony Isabella's end here.
If he was a wrestler, they'd be talking about getting him over. And they're certainly getting him over with the audience with these issues. At this point, Breen, Merlin, who has fought the Justice League, as Joe mentioned earlier, but he failed to kill Batman, which apparently was not a good idea because Talia needs him dead because he was supposed to kill Batman for the League of Assassins. He ended up escaping, and then we see Black Lightning is captured by Joey Toledo, but Merlin doesn't think that's a sporting kill, so he's going to release him so he can kill him on his own. At that point, Talia arrives. She ends up shooting Merlin in the leg, and when she does that, he unleashes an arrow, which kills Joey Toledo, the bad guy, the pusher from the 100, as Merlin escapes, and Black Lightning and Talia themselves argue. We get a pretty interesting line here, Eric, as Black Lightning thinks, my name is Jefferson Pierce, and I have become a creature of violence in only the 2nd issue.
Yeah, it's her parting shot, and with any luck, you'll defeat them before you become too much like them, which sets it up for that line. Yeah, this issue was really good because Merlin, like I said, was an established character. He had fought the Justice League in 94 as was referenced. And a footnote. Remember footnotes, kids? And they do such a good job of just, like Joe said, fully, ingraining him in the DC universe. And they've done it in 2 issues because they're introducing Talia, who at the time I said, I don't know if she'd been established as an assassin in her own right yet. That might have come later. I can't remember, but she is more than willing to carry out the 100 or the League of Assassins orders, even though I'm sure it was not in her best interest that Batman be killed.
Yeah,
because we found out years later she had his kid.
Well, also she's selling the 100 as this enormous a threat that not even the League of Assassins really want to deal with.
Well, they don't. They want them dealt with, just not necessarily by them, because she says they're interfering in the world that they wish to create. So she's fine with Black Lightning taking him out.
Yeah, she's fine with helping him, but they don't want to do it themselves because it's going to take a lot. They're not willing to take the losses.
Yeah.
And then that brings us into Black Lightning number 3. The same creative team, and this time we've got Clark Kent opening her up, Joe. He's reporting on the newest vigilante in Metropolis, Black Lightning, and he's interviewing Inspector Henderson, who vows to bring Black Lightning down. They have a pretty good back and forth. It sounds like Clark is leaning towards trusting Black Lightning at this point. We do find out that Black Lightning is wanted for murder, 1 for Joey Toledo, that's put out in the broadcast. And then we get the 100's 2-Bit Tanner, turns out is Lightning's informant and knows where the whale is going to be. So we're going to get the first confrontation between Black Lightning and this mysterious big boss of the 100.
Yeah, and what is it? We're getting all this going on. There's, again, incredible art throughout by Trevor von Eeden, and we're building up the relationship between Black Lightning and Peter Gamby as well. That whole bit again. What was it? We're on page 7, where after all that stuff where we see what Clark's doing, it comes back to Peter, and they're trying to figure out stuff, and this is where we're finding out more about Black Lightning's powers, what this belt does, that he can repel bullets, and those sort of elements that really, a few issues in already, we're still figuring out what Black Lightning can do.
Absolutely. Tony Isabella does a good job taking his spots. Like when Talia and Gamby are talking, they're filling you in on information about Black Lightning and what he can do and what kind of where he is. And they do it once again here. So it's a good opportunity. Instead of going back and doing all this exposition on how he got here, they're filling in all those blanks and keeping things exciting.
Yeah,
absolutely. And as you mentioned, his belt is not acting correctly. He's worried that his powers are going too powerful, Breed. He's like, I'm already wanted for murder one. I might actually kill somebody with this belt that's not kind of controlling my powers. And then we finally do get the first glimpse of Tobias Whale. He's albino. He's enormous, kind of like you remember of Kingpin in Marvel Comics. He's got a ton of strength, although he does look, he's not quite as menacing because he's got this kind of like a whale-shaped head.
Yeah.
Black Lightning arrives at Whale's hideout, immediately is doused with water because apparently they know about the belt, and they take his electromagnetic belt out of the equation. Jefferson does escape and starts taking down Whale's men one by one, but Whale ends up knocking him down. As Inspector Henderson arrives, there's a gun pointed to Black Lightning's head. Whale escapes, and then Lightning has to use his powers to stun the police and escape himself. Right? Very exciting stuff. And we get the first taste of what's going to happen, but they end up going on their own ways.
Yeah, because it seems like as much as he finds out about the 100 seems to be knowing as much about Black Lightning's activities. So somebody there's an informant somewhere on the other side, and that sets up the confrontation in issue 4 when Gamby tells him that it looks like that informant is Jimmy Olsen, because he's been seen with Inspector Henderson. And so that's your foreshadowing for what was to become the first true guest spot in the series.
Yeah.
Very interesting stuff. And I'm a little nervous here going into Black Lightning number 4, Joe, because this name, beware the Cyclotronic Man. What a name for a villain. The Cyclotronic Man. Hopefully I won't mess that one up. We got the same creative team, although we are going to get some changes here in a couple of issues. And we did get the foreshadowing that that Jimmy Olsen was not only informing the police, but also informing Black Lightning's informant. And Black Lightning is taking down a drug smuggling operation. The police appear, and Jimmy Olsen's there. And it seems to confirm his suspicions that Jimmy Olsen is the one that's kind of setting him up. Obviously, Jimmy Olsen is associated with Superman. After Lightning escapes, though, we learn from Jimmy's mouth that he was just there by coincidence. He was not there to help the police find Black Lightning. And then we do find out Tobias Whale has hired the Cyclotronic Man to kill Black Lightning and Superman in Metropolis.
Yeah, and if you were picking this up at the time, you could be in the Superman movie. Details inside.
Beautiful.
So, but yeah, this is Vince Colletta is the inker and embellisher for the rest of this run here of the issues we're doing. And he does a good job. I think Vince Colletta gets a bad rap for some of the work he's done. Particularly, people always point to
him the one that used to erase people's pencils to make the inking go faster? Yeah,
because it was there used to be this idea that you had to get the books to print on time, and so yeah, there's two sides to that argument, and
he was used as the inker. If you were too slow, he put you on your book. So because you were too slow, you would have to erase your stuff and redo it.
Yeah, but yeah, and again, this book has so much action in it. It starts off with action, and then it's pages of action. And Trevor Von Eeden does a very good job at all that dynamic movement. Just throughout. It's a real shame we didn't get more Trevor Von Eeden comics over the years.
Absolutely. He appears he was a wonder kid. He's doing this at 17 years old. He obviously took to the storytelling method, and he does a wonderful job here. Breen, we do get the Cyclotronic Man kidnapping Jimmy Olsen, and it's supposed to bring Black Lightning back into his trap, but Lightning actually sees him. He jumps from a rooftop. I think he grabs his ankle as he's trying to escape. He knocks down the Cyclotronic Man, and they're fighting, and he almost falls off the roof, and then Jimmy saves him, and he uses that distraction to kind of use his powers on both men. It definitely hurts Jimmy. Black Lightning's over him. Superman arrives, and it looks like Black Lightning perhaps has taken out Jimmy Olsen, and he says, "Get away from him, or I'm going to tear you apart." Superman to Black Lightning himself, and we're getting a misunderstanding here, Bree.
Yeah. Classic misdirect. It happens in comics. It's been happening from day one. Mm-hmm. I didn't want to gloss over the fact that this was back in the Mr. Action days of Jimmy Olsen. Mm. So it wasn't far-fetched for Jimmy to get a clean punch in on Black Lightning when he's trying to strong arm him. Obviously, he's not going to win that fight, but he's not. Jimmy Olsen is no cream puff at this time. Now, as for the Cyclotronic Man, he was revealed to be a past loser named Ned Cregan, who had fought the Batman back in issue 195, I think, as a villain called Bag of Bones. And so this is his upgrade because his powers were killing him. So the 100 got him out of jail, and their scientists worked up a new power set for him. And that's how he became the Cyclotronic Man. But it's another example.
If he touches you, he can make your molecules start moving, correct?
Another example of how well Tony Isabella brought in elements of DC's past and made it fit in a current storyline, because there was not a whole lot of that going on at DC at the time. This was very Marvel in feel.
Yeah,
but
I will agree with you. Yes, it felt like a Marvel comic.
Yeah, so and again, like I said, they after the battle, where Jimmy's earned Lightning's respect and vice versa. He gets hurt, he goes to help him, and the classic misunderstanding. Superman arrives on the roof. It's like, holy crap! Like I said, when that book was on the stands and you could just see Superman in the back, the foreground of the cover, it's like, this is going to be great, and it was.
Absolutely. So, just so we can clear up his Cyclotronic Man's powers, if he grabs you, he can shake up. He gets your molecules moving. What's he using when he's got people like in stasis? Like he's got him some type of power where he's kind of holding them in place.
I think he's manipulating like the molecules around someone.
Okay. It didn't exactly go into all the details. I was like, I'm not sure exactly how this works. I know when he grabs Superman eventually. I don't know that. So
part of the Marvel feel of this too is we are definitely getting subplots, especially with the introduction of Lynn Stewart here, who they run into each other. There's clearly something wrong. Mm-hmm. Lynn Stewart is she's a little taken aback, but she understands, and you're like, well, what the hell's going on here? That these two run into each other, and you can start piecing things together, but at the time, I don't think people would have necessarily jumped immediately to that conclusion, which we'll get to shortly.
Absolutely. So that gets us into Black Lightning number 5. Nobody beats Superman. And it begins exactly where the last issue left off. Superman is about to destroy Black Lightning, and there's always like 1 or 2 pages to catch you up. And I think for the fact that it's a 17-page comic is brilliant.
Yeah.
What he's able to accomplish. But Superman realizes, as he's about to destroy him, that Jimmy's actually alive. He goes to kind of go to him, check on him. Black Lightning sees this as an aggressive maneuver. He decides he's going to defend himself. And Superman really underestimates Black Lightning here, Joe. He thinks that he's going to take him out with ease. I think he maybe even dinks him with his finger. He ends up taking a couple of blows. Obviously, Superman is more powerful than Black Lightning.
Oh, yeah.
But as Superman is tending to Jimmy, once they've kind of got that out of the way, the Cyclotronic Man once again grabs Superman himself, and you can really see the molecule powers start working. Black Lightning knocks him off, him being the Cyclotronic Man, and kind of gets us to the midway point, Joe.
Yeah, I mean, again, part of what's so compelling about this book is there are more pages of action than not in all of these issues. It's really incredible, and the way they set up Superman again is they let Black Lightning get a good shot in on him, so you can see how powerful Black Lightning can be if Superman's not paying attention and underestimating him. Mm-hmm. But they don't undermine Superman, because right after that, like you had said before, you get the flick. And he just
once again, he thinks I've taken care of it. He ends up grabbing a pole and coming back and kicking him in the head.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really well done, and done in a way that doesn't undermine Superman's powers either.
Absolutely.
Yeah, the first rule of comics is the main character has to be the star of the book and be awesome, which is tough to do when your guest star is the most powerful man in the world. And they handled it, I thought, pretty well.
Yeah. Absolutely. It's exciting. It was a lot of fun. It was just, just kinetic energy comes out of this comic book. As Joe has already mentioned, with the amount of pure action, though in the exposition and during the action, it's always appreciated.
Yep.
But certainly not something you'd see very often nowadays, Breen. And we do finally get Superman and Black Lightning are talking. So the misunderstanding is going to be patched up. And we do see this. We get is it a fastball special? Superman tosses Black Lightning through the roof of a building, which is, I think, a 100 hideout.
Yeah. Well, before we get to that, because I said that might be the silly point of this entire run. But right before that, I would say is probably the most powerful part of all of these issues when Superman says he has to take him in. He goes, I can't let you take me in. And he goes, there's too much at stake. And I'm going to read his panel. He goes, take a good look down at what goes on down there. The streets I grew up on have become infected with a vicious human cancer called the 100, and it's malignant as hell. Every day it eats away at our city and other parts of our souls. They're all down there, pushers and pimps in every size and shape, and you can't stop them, Superman. And then he goes on to say, they see you coming, they crawl back into their holes and wait for you to pass. And I thought that was just a great speech. And I said, and it was so powerful. I didn't even bother. I said, why didn't Superman just fly him to that place and help him?
Yeah,
Jimmy's okay, but again, you're letting the character that the book is named after be awesome. So that's what made it kind of cool. So he goes, aim for a soft roof.
He gives it the fastball special. I thought it was hilarious. Yeah, and then we do finally get. I'm sorry, Joe.
No, I was just going to say, fastball special only showed up a year before in X-Men and X-Men number 100, and when Black Lightning number 1 debuted, I forgot to mention too that was X-Men 104 came out, which was the return of Magneto, the first time that Claremont was writing Magneto in the book.
Beautiful. That's good stuff. So we get him thrown through the roof of this 100 hideout, and we finally do learn, Breen, that Jimmy Olsen was set up. There's another villain that can take on his face, and then we get Black Lightning and Cyclotronic Man fighting, and so that villain escapes, and so there's somebody out there that can mimic people, specifically Jimmy Olsen. And at the end, we do have Superman and Black Lightning kind of leaving on good terms as they have their own separate missions. And it's explained pretty well by Tony Isabella why Superman can't take care of all these problems.
Yeah. Sorry, is that to Joe? That's my bad.
No, you're fine. I mean, again, all of this is so fast-paced, and especially from the Jimmy Olsen fake out that he must be the informant. We keep getting these really good cliffhangers on these issues. Like this one ends with, we find out who the informant is. It's the inspector's son.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a great bit because it's that whole Hitchcock philosophy of the audience. Like you have a diner scene where there's a bomb under the table and the audience knows, but the people sitting at the table don't. So we are getting that information, but Black Lightning doesn't have this information, and you're waiting for that bomb to go off. Tony Isabella at this point is just writing it out of the park.
Absolutely. That brings us into Black Lightning 6, One Man's Poison. There's a new colorist on this issue. I think it's Jerry Serpe. I might have pronounced that one incorrectly. But Black Lightning, he finds 2 operatives of the 100. They're kind of, lackeys, for a better word. He's looking for information on Gambi's whereabouts. I wasn't even aware that he had been kidnapped at this point. I guess I missed that. But we see this character, Cyanide, ends up shooting him with like a trank dart from a window. And then 2-Bit Tanner, his informant, arrives to kind of help him. And that's when we learn that there's a $1 billion bounty on Black Lightning's head. And we get a pretty good moment here, Eric Breen, where Black Lightning kind of explains to 2-Bit Tanner how his father died, and then Gambi practically raised him, and that's why it's so important for him to go find him.
Yeah, and what I really liked about this particular issue was again, historical context, you see 2-Bit Tanner kind of makes you think maybe a little bit of like Huggy Bear from Starsky and Hutch, which was on the air at that time. But Tony Isabella made him a real character and really someone that you could confide in. And there became a genuine friendship and the pressure of knowing that it wasn't 2-Bit or Olsen that was the informant. So they didn't have that cloud of suspicion any longer. He opens up to him. And then, 2-Bit says, hey, you didn't have to do that. And, he goes, I know, but sometimes a guy needs a friend to talk things over with, and they walk off arm in arm, kind of like, Rick and Louie at the end of Casablanca almost. And then in the background, you see, Cyanide picking up the dart, which that is some foreshadowing that, again, since this book doesn't miss a trick, we find out the importance a little bit later.
Absolutely. That gets us right into Cyanide has Gambi tied up in a warehouse, essentially to lure in Black Lightning. And Cyanide and his goons stop Black Lightning. They're going to turn him into the 100. That's when we find out that dart has him essentially under mind control of Cyanide himself. That's what he's been infected with. And this is a pretty interesting back and forth here, Joe. And at the very end, Cyanide says specifically, I just can't understand how much concern you would have for the man that killed your father. Speaking of Gambi. Yeah. And that is an enormous cliffhanger.
Yeah. No, I mean, this is huge, but we're getting a lot of information here because earlier in the issue, we find out that Lynn Stewart used to be married to Jefferson Pierce.
They were divorced, yes.
Yeah. And another thing to bring up the quality of the writing here, I feel like a lesser writer would have front-loaded all of that Peter Gambi exposition within the first issue or two. But this approach, they get you so sucked into the story, it's so filled with action, they bring it up in issue 6, and it works perfectly.
Absolutely. It just builds the tension. You're sitting on the edge of your seat waiting for the next issue. What the hell is going on here? Is he lying? Is he telling the truth? If he is telling the truth, what's Black Lightning going to do? Mm-hmm. It's obviously the death of his father was very impactful for him. Did you have something to say, Eric?
I was going to say, I just got to say real quick, for a guy as young as Trevor Von Eeden was when he did this book, if you look at the last panel of issue 6, the look on Black Lightning's face as he gets that bombshell dropped on him, I mean, this kid was talented beyond his years. Because I said that the facial expressions, the action sequences, just you'd have never known that this was basically his first professional work.
Yeah,
I said absolutely. I said it was a. Let's say by this point it was a long wait between issues because this is really getting good.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, that gets us into issue number 7. Black Lightning and Gambi, they're strung up in the Southside Sports Coliseum on this big X, and they're waiting to be executed by the Whale and the 100. The Whale slaps Cyanide around after he kind of says he doesn't want to kill Gambi. He's like, there's no sport in that. I'm a great hunter. I shouldn't have to do that. But he kind of slaps him around. Gambi tries to use this, to get him to free Black Lightning, and he's like, nah, I don't want the 100 kind of after me. And then he leaves, and this gives Black Lightning the opportunity to confront Gambi. He's like, can you deny that you killed my father? And he can't deny it.
No, it's sorry. I'm just so entranced with this issue. I mean, this issue, again, tons of action. That whole bit where he can't tell him he didn't kill his dad. Just the whole setup, the Whale, and how basically this is this like Roman Colosseum thing, but it's also a callback to how Jefferson Pierce was an Olympian. So, and it's all subtle. There's no thought bubble of Jefferson Pierce going like, my God, I'm in a Coliseum. It's just like the Olympics in 1972. Which is the kind of thing you might have suspected in some other DC titles that were coming out at the time, which also adds to how this feels like a Marvel book.
Yeah.
If I can add something real quick, and they also gave you layers to Tobias's personality, because when Cyanide says he doesn't want to do the killing himself, he goes, he smacks him and goes, no, he goes, you've never killed yourself. You've just led countless other people to their death. He goes, your hypocrisy sickens even me.
Yeah.
I thought that was a great line, because it kind of, I think it ends up waking up Cyanide to basically makes him look in the mirror, as we find out later in this same issue, which again, like I said, you blink and you miss a lot in this story.
Yes.
Because I think that was kind of like what gave him the impetus to do what he does at the end of this issue.
Yeah.
Well, as we get to the end, 2-Bit Tanner infiltrates the Coliseum. He kind of distracts Cyanide's men. While that's happening, Black Lightning finally escapes. He starts beating up the thugs and frees Gambi. Then we see the Whale kind of orders Black Lightning to execute the Whale orders them to execute Black Lightning when he kind of enters the Coliseum. They're going to shoot him. And we see Gambi himself actually dives in front of the bullet, takes it, and dies right there. After that, Black Lightning lays waste to the 100, and the Whale, before mourning Gambi's death, the police arrest the Whale, and we do learn that Detective Henderson's son, I believe he's aware of this at this point, has actually died in here as well. Right?
Oh, okay. Yeah. Also, real quick, there's a spot in here where when 2-Bit is getting there, and he pulls a gun on one of the thugs, and he goes, "Who are you?" And he goes, "Don't you recognize me? I'm Charlie's Angels, all three of them."
Yeah.
So I love the topical references, and like I said, it's the magic of television. We all still know who they are, but this was a great issue. I said the fight, the note, there was no speech as he's dying in his arms. It's just, like I said, just instant death. And as I said, Cyanide programmed the thing to kill both the target and the shooter, because I think he was woken up to the fact that he'd been a real piece of shit. And I think that's what made him basically take himself out too.
Yeah.
And it's just, it's so bittersweet, because they didn't get a resolution, didn't get an explanation as to why he killed his father. Like, what were the circumstances that led up to what actually did happen? And he's just left with those what ifs, just like Inspector Henderson at the end of the issue, as he picks up the mask in the pipe, and I think the bells and whistles go off. It's something he didn't want to believe. He's forced to confront. So you've got, both of those kind of like mental cliffhangers right there that may or may not ever be resolved. And one can't be, and the other one may or may not be. And again, phenomenal. I said
it's certain to leave the hero completely conflicted. Because he killed my father, but he just saved me.
Yeah, because actually, I said the fight between Black Lightning and Tobias Whale isn't the main thing in this story, and it wasn't treated like it. I mean, they built up to it, but it wasn't some grand battle, because it was more about the other things going on in his life and everything they represented. That it was almost like Tobias was, he was that figurehead. But like I said, so anybody that complained that there was kind of an anticlimactic battle really didn't get what the story was trying to tell. And they did still have one more chance in issue 8.
Yeah, it's the next issues where they finally tie that one up, Joe. We get into Black Lightning number 8. We got a new color. I believe Mario said is on here. And we see that Tobias Whale has immediately escaped jail, so he didn't stay very long. And he ends up taking Inspector Henderson with him. At the same time, we see Jefferson is attending Gambi's funeral. He's kind of recalling their time together. Seeing all the things that happen, you can see he's very conflicted. And, he kind of forgives Gambi, I think, in the end before he leaves the cemetery and says his final goodbye. At least that's the way I took it, Joe.
Yeah, and that's confirmed when, 2-Bit gives him that letter to basically be like, this is what, Peter wanted you to have this if something had happened to him. And this sort of explains, like, why things went the way they did. And, Jefferson Pierce makes that decision that he would rather, that he's already forgiven him, and he would rather not dwell on it, and just rips up the letter. And it's a really powerful scene.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a good character moment. That's like a character defining moment, Breen.
Yeah, in the page before that, you get the conversation with his ex-wife, and you realize that, because he even mentions it in an earlier issue. He goes, when Tuba said, "How did you let her get away?" and he goes, "It was a different time. We were different people. We've grown. We've both grown, or I've grown and changed, or whatever." You get the feeling that there may be a possibility of a reconciliation. So he's starting to put the pieces of his life back together, and the Gambi. I think the tearing out the paper represents closing that chapter and keeping the memories closer to as he knew them. Like I said, because he had forgiven him, and I said I said great character moment, and that's not the end of the story. And that's, again, I said, that's something else you don't see much of today. That this was at the beginning of the story and not the end, because there's still one more thing to tell.
Absolutely, because the Whale is holding Inspector Henderson as bait for Black Lightning. We immediately see Black Lightning is storming the building. He finds Whale, and Henderson in the room. There's a bunch of guns pointing at his head. Lightning does defeat the 100. He ties Whale down this time with like some steel bars. And we do finally get that big epic confrontation, and he does come out on top. And Lightning and Henderson essentially leave on good terms, Breen.
Yeah. Well, I said it even says, "I severely misjudged you." I mean, there's the classic cop vigilante dynamic that, I'm going to bring you in. It's like, on the surface, it's like, I'm going to ignore all the crime you have helped me, get rid of, and just go after you because we can't have vigilantes. But over the course of these 8 issues, Black Lightning earned his respect.
Yeah.
So at the end, that's another thing about this story is Black Lightning earned the respect of Superman, Inspector Henderson, those around, 2-Bit, it's just everybody that he came in contact with. So I thought that was kind of fitting that it would end on the 2 characters that had both, been through so much. Because we also forgot to mention that Inspector Henderson had a heart attack in one of the earlier issues. Yes. And so
he leaves the hospital even though they're like, you can't go.
So I mean, the way the conversation they have, and then when Jefferson pulls a Batman on 2-Bit, so you get a little comic relief at the very end, and then the last panel where he's looking out over the city and says, for the first time in years, the sun is shining, it's a new dawn, and Suicide Slumps. I mean, it's just perfect. And again, the fight was not much of a fight because when push came to shove, Black Lightning, was all over him, and so it's like as a crime boss without his henchmen, he was basically just a big pile of blubber.
Yeah, and I love that when they beat him on page 15. They have the fragile sign laying on him.
I didn't catch that. I've read that.
It's really great. But yeah, it's and they build up to it that you kind of know Black Lightning's going to come out on top because they're building up like the 100's basically defeated. There's only 9 of them left, and Tobias Whale because they beat up the other 3 guards that were outside. And, the tide's turned, but that's a good bit in the story. And we also breezed past this earlier, but in one of the earlier issues when they're talking about Suicide Slums and Metropolis, there's that whole bit about there's only so many blocks separating like main Metropolis and Suicide Slums, and the sun shines on like both, but they're treated so differently. And they talk about how Superman's here, but it's such a systemic problem, and it's so many gangsters and drug pushers and stuff like that they just disperse and will hide from Superman, and he can't. There's so many of them. It's the kind of problem Superman can't deal with, and you need a street level character. Mm-hmm. And again, it just all goes back to that writing and making it clear, and Tony being able to sell that to the audience of anyone who might be questioning, like, why would you need a Black Lightning in Metropolis? You got Superman. He gives a solid explanation for that.
Absolutely. So this is wonderful. It's the way you introduce a hero. It's a different take, and I got the different vibes when I was reading it. It's like, oh, this feels much more like a Marvel comic at this time rather than a DC comic, and I think it's a fresh change. It feels like DC is getting ready to kind of change their stripes and just go in a new direction, which we certainly see that they do in about 5 years, is when they really turn the corner and just DC kind of becomes a different comic book publisher.
Yeah.
I do appreciate talking about this. Do either of you have anything last words for Black Lightning 1 through 8?
I do. This may be the best introduction to a character in the 45 years that I've been reading. You read these 8 issues and kind of got the feeling that for a story that was clearly about a black character, it didn't become the focal point of the story. Because it was just there, and you knew it. But it's like I said, this was a character first, and these 8 issues, I said, everything from the footnotes to the flashbacks to the total ingraining him in the DC universe, just the plot twists. This was an incredible, storyline. And Wes, we will eventually do that top 10 DC stories, and we'll be talking about this again.
All right. Well, yeah. Joe, did you have any last words about Black Lightning, or?
No, just basically what Breen said, to echo that. This is certainly easily one of the best Bronze Age debuts of a character, one of the best Bronze Age multi-issue stories you're going to read, probably from Marvel or DC even. It's really high up there. Tony, Isabella, it makes you wonder why he wasn't a bigger name at that time, or ended up having a career trajectory similar to, your Len Weins and your Jerry Conways and all that, because he was up there with the best of them in this story.
Absolutely. So next week, Breen is out, and Joe and we're going to review, I think, something indie. We're thinking about Will Eisner, but we'll see. We might do Mouse. We haven't quite decided it is, and we will have a special guest in here. But Breen doesn't want us to do the Death of Captain Marvel without it. He said no.
It's a good call.
Okay, buddy. We'll hold on.